This is Sid Okaiba, and thanks for listening to It's Recording Time Media, the most pathetic show you could listen to. You really should be listening to something I do, like KaibaCorp.com.
I'm going to have to adjust it for a little bit here, but I'm excited to have Tommy Dreamer next to me. Everyone get a round of applause, Tommy Dreamer. Wrestling legend. When I say wrestling legend, it always sounds like someone who doesn't wrestle anymore. And you're in the thick of it, almost going every weekend.
Yep.
Why continue? I mean, you've done it all, you've been to it all, but obviously you still love it.
Absolutely. Last year I did 206 shows. I'm 47 years old. I kind of screwed myself because Terry Funk is my mentor, and he was doing moonsaults at 55. So I got to keep on going to outlast him, and he's in his 70s and still trying to wrestle. He called me up the other day, and he's like, "Let's shoot an angle at a convention, and we'll wrestle." I was like, "You can't wrestle anymore. Stop."
And he said many times that he was going to stop. Have you said that out loud before, or you're just not going to be that person that says, "This is it"?
Nope. If anybody knows anything about me, I'm a man of my word. Like, when I left WWE, I said I would never wrestle for ECW again, even though I knew they were getting rid of it. I will always stick to whatever I say as a stipulation. I do it in my own company, House of Hardcore, and like tonight, I'm doing something where it was me and Beulah's last ever walk to the ring, and she was in my corner, and at times, even if I need her, I can't, because I hate, that was a big thing with me as a kid, like, oh, this guy's going to leave wrestling or retire, and then they would show back up. I used to hate that because I feel it's a tool to try to get people to see your show. Like when I wrote Hardcore Justice, the last ever me versus Raven match, and I stood by it. Promoters always asked me to wrestle him, and I'm like, no, I made a stipulation, and I gotta kind of stick to it.
So you've left money on the table in a sense,
For
the love of the business.
Just
Personal
to me,
integrity. Yeah.
there you go. Wrestling fans, I'm a wrestling fan, and I always hated that. And it was just, if I'm gonna say I retire, trust me, I will never, when I say I'm retiring, I will never wrestle ever again.
Right.
I'll be done. I don't want that to happen, because I really do, I love it. When I come through that curtain, I'm 25 years old again, I have a full set of hair, I'm about 20 pounds lighter, and it's the greatest feeling in the world. I love it.
You talk about the greatest feeling, greatest fans, and you made some of the greatest friends. I mean, through all the podcasts and people I hear, they just always speak so well of you, and there are other people who don't speak well of. How do you become someone who everybody likes? What's worked for you?
I just treat people the way I want to be treated, and I always call people out on their bullshit, excuse my language, and that's kind of the way it is, and yes, I have been blessed. Though most of my friends make fun of me most of the time, but Edge and Christian, Bubba, but always just want to treat people how you treat yourself, and if I walked up to Vince McMahon and punched him in his face, he would bleed. If he did that to me, nobody's better than another person because of their wealth, their status. I got lucky breaks. I'm still a fan. I wanted to do this since I was 9 years old, and just because I crossed over doesn't mean I'm better than anybody. That's kind of always been my life.
You're
good parenting by my parents.
That always helps out too. And you think about you have been here at the. Have you been to StocktonCon? I know you've done a lot here in Northern California.
No,
so
I've never been to StocktonCon.
Okay, so how's it been so far for you?
Awesome. Yeah, it's funny how many people have actually come up to me and tell me about ECW. And with the WWE Network, you live forever. But there's so many people telling me how they used to try to find the original ECW. Or that I've met 4 people today who were actually at the one show we did on the West Coast. And they're like, man, I drove down. There was a riot. It was cool, and it was that stuff is awesome to me. And when you're my life, I could sum it up. My 20s I gave to ECW. What most people don't realize, when ECW went out of business, I was 29 years old. And I gave my 30s to WWE and my 40s now to myself. And but when you're in ECW, everything was about ECW. When I was in WWE, it's always about the next town trying to chase that dangling carrot. But now I get to sit back and hear stories or how wrestling, myself, ECW, just helped people in difficult times in their lives or how people relate to wrestling. And that's the same with me. So I enjoy it. So I've been enjoying a lot of people telling me their stories. One, they're not here, but like one people, I was trying to find this picture. This guy loved ECW. He's like, you're the only reason why I came here. I was trying to find a picture at one of my shows. I think I kept him at my table for like 15 minutes. I was like, no, wait, hang on, I gotta find it. I couldn't find the picture. I felt like he wanted to leave me as opposed to I wanted to leave.
So you don't mind talking about ECW as much, because I mean, I remember those days where, and you talk about finding it, that was, you know, WWE and WCW, you weren't hard to find, but ECW was hard to find for a lot of people, but they found it because they loved it, and that's got to be a compliment to the product that you were part of.
Absolutely, you know, and that's how I grew up. Again, I'm 47. We had, when I grew up early, there was on the UHF channel, we had the Telemundo, and on Tuesday nights, they aired wrestling from Florida, and that's how I saw Dusty Rhodes wrestle. And I had to stay up every night, 11:30. I was 10 years old, but I made a deal with my parents I had to get up Wednesday for school, or else I couldn't watch Tuesday night to see what, and I made sure every Wednesday I got up because I had to see what happened to Dusty. And, but I went out, a wrestling fan would search, you know, for quality wrestling. Now forget it, it's that, you know, when people ask me how do I become a wrestler, I'm like, there's something called Google, and look it up.
Yeah.
When I first started, you couldn't find out how to be the business was still very secretive. But you're here, thanks for coming.
And then you talk about Northern California. I know you've done stuff here with APW. I believe I saw you wrestle right across the street at the Memorial Center. It was Carl Fredericks, I believe, that you wrestled as a young kid. That you wrestled. I mean, you wrestled a lot of the young ones that want to get a chance and things like that. But Northern California, what's your experience? What's your thoughts about the wrestling business up here, including the Bay Area, of course, San Francisco, and things like that?
I think WWE has forgotten about its fan base up here. Even I remember when I was with WWE, we only came here like twice a year, and it is such ingrained, if that's the word, in wrestling history, and you know, from San Francisco, Cal Palace era, and just there's so many great wrestling fans, and whenever there's a big event, you can see and appreciate. I mean, they had the WrestleMania up here, and just so many fans are like, oh, where are you from? Oh, up here. We've never had any stuff. So it's cool that they brought a WrestleMania here, but I think WWE kind of forgets about this area, which they shouldn't. But independent wrestling is alive, and you guys can go out there and find a lot of cool local wrestling that, you know, obviously fans support.
And I've been hearing, you know, the stories about House Hardcore and which company, and I mean, you're pulling in numbers that most independent wrestling could never do, even with the names that, you know, that are run by people who were in the WWE. What is it about House of Hardcore that becomes so popular?
I want to say my reputation that, I mean, I go all out.
Yeah.
And I think my reputation with people / fans of, I'm going to give you all that I possibly can. And I just want, guys, my father took me to WrestleMania. He took me to so many WrestleManias. Wrestling shows. And when I'll tell you a quick story. WWE Network, they just put out an NWA, AWA show on the network. It was Ric Flair versus Dusty Rhodes. It was a joint show and had no commentary. My father had, later on in life, he got Parkinson's disease. And he's been gone about 14 years. And I couldn't remember his voice. I don't know if it's because I've had a lot of concussions, but I couldn't remember what my father actually sounded like. So I'm watching this show, and the first match was Ron Bass versus J.J. Dillon. And my father would always ask me, who do you think's going to win? And I'd be like, Ron Bass is going to win. He's like, I think the blonde guy. I was like, Dad, he's a manager. A manager can't beat a wrestler. You gotta understand, I'm 13 years old. And Ron Bass won, and as soon as Ron Bass won, I remember looking at my father like, duh, told you so. And when I started watching that, at that moment, I remembered it. I'm getting goosebumps, but I remember my father's voice. It was a great moment, and it was a great moment I had with my dad. He still looked like my father. Nobody was sick, and I always want people, when they come to my shows, to have moments like that. It was just like, there's so much crap in the world. I just want everybody to have a good time, forget about the real world. It was Vince McMahon who actually told me put smiles on people's faces after 9/11, and that really, really stuck with me.
Right.
But like a memory like that, like I said, when Man in the Box hits, I be morph into what I kind of used to be. And like when I see cool wrestling events like that, or people tell me stories, it's just like, that's why I do this, and that's why I love it.
And you know, I see a lot of, you know, I remember staying up late at night where I'm from, just south here in the Modesto area. We would only get it at, I believe, about 10 o'clock on a Saturday and 11 o'clock when I was 13, 14 years old. And you would go through some crazy matches. Are you still doing those kind of matches? Are you asking that from you? I mean, I know you don't have to prove anything, but do you see that from people like, I wonder if he's going to take this to the
I normally wind up going through a table. Everyone asks me where my kendo stick usually is. I hate it because I'm usually one who gets hit with it. But no, I mean, I just work with Impact Wrestling, and me and Eli Drake had a pretty hardcore match. It's kind of, I don't want to say expected for me to be that way, but I enjoy it. And I'm wrestling with MLW. I just did a Singapore cane match with Brian Pillman Jr. And I enjoy my, kind of, I guess want to say like what Chris Jericho's doing. He's doing it on a bigger scale with New Japan, but like what Terry Funk did for ECW, I like doing on independence and in my own company or other people's companies, trying to work with the younger talent and helping spread it forward, I guess.
Yeah. We're gonna, I know about 15 minutes we'll have Dan Severin take your spot, so you can get back up there and get interaction with fans. So questions from the audience, go ahead.
Two separate questions. You mentioned Bubba. How is it working with he and Dan on Busted Open? Being an analyst, you know, and looking at it from, I guess, you know, behind the desk. And the second question is, this movie's already 10 years old, but your thoughts on the wrestler?
I enjoy doing Busted Open a lot. Getting paid to talk about wrestling is pretty cool.
Pretty awesome.
And the show is Howard Stern's #1. There's some political talk show #2, and now Busted Open is #3 on Sirius. So that's pretty good. I could talk forever, so that's good. And the other host, Dave LaGreca, he is such a wrestling fan, and it's funny at times. He gets so excited, and me and Bubba will be like, "Dude, you hang out with us all the time. Like, stop being a fan for that." He's like, "I can't." So like, that's cool. The Wrestler I thought was a decent movie. I thought it did portray the negative side of professional wrestling. And it was also, like you said, 10 years ago. As many as, but that's what they want to see. But as many as there are real stories of wrestlers like that, but there's also a lot of success stories of people who, you know, do professional wrestling and they don't have to do it again. They did it because they loved it, and they do other things.
Yes.
You were mentioning that you started off in the 20s, WWE at your 30s, and say you're enjoying your 40s now. I was curious, do you have any children? And if so, what's the oldest?
I have twin daughters. They are 14. I married Beulah McGillicuddy, who was my manager in ECW. She doesn't like me much, but that's okay. And, no, I have 2 beautiful daughters, and I couldn't have asked for a better mother to help me, because during WWE, man, there was one time, 298 days I was away, and I have 2 great children, and it's a lot because of her. They're my best friends. They were in The Sopranos. A lot of people ask me that question. They were in the last 2 seasons of The Sopranos. They were washed up before they were 2. So I'm still
Go ahead.
How was it working with the Practical Jokers?
Those guys are great. They're huge wrestling fans. And that show is 95% legit. When the first one, when Hugh came to my show, I was like, well, if he's getting in the ring, and he was like, what? And like, they whisked him away. So they don't know anything. And the other one where I pulled his pants down in the mall, he didn't even know I was showing up. They knew, like, hey, somebody's gonna come if you don't figure out this, what do they call it? Not a stunt, a dare challenge. And but he had no clue I was coming. When he saw me turn around the corner, he's like, holy shit, it's Tommy Dreamer. And the guy who was doing it was like, where? And he's like, just finished doing this, because he was trying to. But they're great. They're huge wrestling fans, great guys, and talk about they paid their dues too, because I mean now they're selling out Wembley Stadium. Their shows just got syndicated everywhere. And back in the day, they're four guys who kind of just grew up making fun of each other, and now they make money of it. So, and they great wrestling fans, great guys.
Go ahead, right at the back.
Who's someone that you would like to see in the Hall of Fame?
Christian. So you won't shut up about it. Ivan Koloff, Rick Rude. There's a lot of people deserving. I like to see people like that.
Go ahead.
Tommy, thanks for signing my sign.
You got it.
And then I know you bring up kendo sticks and the hardcore matches. Those were always my favorite. Well, you guys put your body on the line anyways, so we appreciate that, and you guys are great to the fans. But what's the best weapon to use in a hardcore match for you to use against somebody else? I mean, they use kendo sticks, chairs, ladders, tables.
Well, I'll tell what a lot of people, the kendo sticks, they hurt the most. Here's why. They're a real weapon. They're like a chair is for sitting, a table is for displaying stuff, but that's a real weapon. They hurt the most. They're not, the strings are pulled all the way tight. It's like getting hit with a baseball bat, but every time you get hit, they open up and they clip your skin. So they start, but they're a real training tool. I hate them. Legos hurt. It's a new thing. Legos hurt, like if you all know, from sitting on them, stepping on them with your kids, or thumbtacks don't hurt as much when you go into them, unless they're in your fingers or where your elbows, but pulling them out hurt more. I normally like to take off, if I have a shirt, I'll take off my shirt quick, and if I have them all here, I'll just kind of try to go like that. Because pulling them out one by one is just like getting a needle all the time, and I don't like needles. That's why I really I wasn't a steroid guy, because I can do anything, dive and fire, but I never liked needles. So, and getting thumbtacks is like getting a whole bunch of needles in your body, and they hurt in your head too. That's why you want to tuck your chin and try to avoid it.
Can you answer? It's Mike.
Moving in them stinks. Same with barbed wire. Going to barbed wire is kind of like weird, but then when you got to move around in it, they're constantly cutting. Don't recommend anyone doing this.
You talk about all these wrestling fans that are outside of wrestling, but some of this, I'm sure you talk about being on Practical Jokers. These are now stars, and have there been some stars, some movie stars or sports stars where like they look at you and they're just like, you're the best thing that's ever happened, and you look at them, you're like, well, you're this person or this person.
No, I've only, if you say fanboyed, I only fanboyed to wrestlers, and but no, it's funny. I mean, I met so many famous people in my life, and they all kind of wrap it up to wrestling. I met Ozzy. I hosted Ozfest 3 years in a row, and I finally got to meet Ozzy. And inside, I'm like, oh my God, this is Ozzy Osbourne. And he's like, hey mate, you're the wrestler. Thanks for being here. I'm like, cool. And he's like, I was in WrestleMania. And I was like, yeah, I know. He's like, man, those Bulldogs can party. And I'm like, wow, this is Ozzy Osbourne saying that the British Bulldogs can party. So it all kind of wraps up in wrestling. I think I've met one person in my life that doesn't know what professional wrestling is, and that was actually my dermatologist. And she had no clue what professional wrestling was. And so I had to explain why I had so much scar tissue on my forehead, and before I took off my shirt, because this seriously was like a 30-minute, what do you mean you used to cut yourself? And I was like, yeah, well, it's professional wrestling. I thought everybody knew. And then before I took off my shirt, I was like, well, you gotta understand, I've been on fire, I've been caned, I've been in barbed wire, thumbtacks. I have a lot of scars all over my body. And she's like, this is professional wrestling? And she's like, I thought it was all acting. I was like, I wish.
Questions? Go ahead.
With the WWE version of ECW, looking back, or was there something that could have happened differently to have kept that going?
I think it was kind of doomed from the beginning, as well as there was a lot of naysayers that didn't want it to happen. Thank God for Shane McMahon, John Laurinaitis, they really were pushing for it. But I guess the best, it was rough. But I think they kind of had the moxie of, well, if ECW was so popular, how come it's not doing this, this, and this? And, you know, I would always say it was, ECW was a product of a divorce, and then here came a new couple, or a new husband, new wife, and they have ownership / parenting rights to your child, and you can try to say it needs to be this way, but you don't have the legal rights to say it. So, and I think fans expected and wanted it to be, and it was promoted to be that way, but it quickly changed, as we all saw. But it gave a lot of great moments for people, and it was able, it I feel is what NXT is now. That's what it should have been.
Yeah.
But NXT was a WWE creation as opposed to ECW, which was somebody else's creation.
Right. Do you have a question back there? I'll get you next. Go ahead.
I have met Stan Lee a couple times. Long story short, my first ever job, I worked in a comic book store in Yonkers, New York, called the Dragon's Den. I was probably 12 or 13, and Stan Lee walked into the comic book store and asked if he could sign autographs there, and everybody there is freaking out because it's
Just open the door. Stan
and
Lee.
they were like, can you come back like next week and we'll advertise you? And he was like, sure. And he came back next week, and later on I heard he was broke, and he used to do that a lot, just show up at comic book stores in the 80s. And I have like 3 X-Men 94s signed, the big book too. I was a big comic book guy, and then I had children, then I wasn't allowed to collect it, I guess.
Good question.
Oh, and I met him at a couple of Comic Cons, and he just stood there. I think they should taxidermy him, because when you took a picture with Stan Lee, he just stood with his
Same pose.
Same pose. You take a picture, unless you're a woman, then he magically came to life and spoke to you. God bless Stan Lee. But I think they could just cart him out there all the time. Go ahead.
So there's a lot of different new acts in WWE. Do you think that they've strayed away from their kind of core, or do you think they've kind of stayed the same throughout the years?
I don't know. Here's the hardest part. You can't knock their business formula because Fox just gave them $1 billion. I don't know if they're producing stars as opposed to here's the WWE and everyone around it. That's, I think, the biggest difference. I think after we start naming people, we have Roman Reigns, John Cena, but then who are our next big mega stars? From, there was Rock, Austin, Undertaker, Kane, you have Triple H, DX, Big Show, you have all these stars that we could all name, and forget about the 80s, everybody was a star, as opposed to now it's just all these people. And I noticed that they don't fire a lot of people anymore, but the last few people that they fired, when they did a group firing and then all these guys went out on the indies, it was kind of like they flamed and burned real quickly because they weren't as big as stars, and promoters were like, I'm not making as much money on them as opposed to other people. So I think that's the biggest, to me, it's a star-driven business in the sense of they are stars because of their athleticism, but who are, I thought they were doing a great job with Drew McIntyre when he came back. Then all of a sudden he loses to Dolph Ziggler, and they're going to do something with Dolph Ziggler, and then Dolph Ziggler loses and Drew McIntyre. So, like even Braun versus Brock, it's like they were pushing that for for Royal Rumble.
Yep.
It's like for the 3rd time now,
Right. It's not special.
It's not. That's it. Stuff needs to be special. I mean, how many times did we watch Bret Hart, Steve Austin? Bret Hart, anybody, Steve Austin versus The Rock, and all those different parts of it. It's different.
As we wrap up, I have to ask, at least personally, I know that it's hard to speak on something that hasn't technically had their first event, but the new AEW, That's got to be exciting just for the guys who are always looking for their break, and to have that seems like maybe could be the next kind of WCW. I mean, there'll never be another WCW, but
Don't say that, they lost $100 million WCW. Hopefully it's a profitable WCW.
yeah.
I think it's great for the industry, it's great that they're signing talents. I was part of All In. Hopefully they crawl before they walk, walk before they run. They're already kind of in the walking stages, but trust me, it's amazing how much money you can burn. Like, for example, I love breaking tables. As a promoter, when you break a table, these things cost $180, and it's literally taking $200 of my dollars and going, and you break 10 of those on a show, that's $2,000, and it's like, there's something to that. So I think it's great, and I always say to aspiring wrestlers, Ring of Honor just lost so many guys. New Japan just lost so many guys, but then there's opening spots for those guys.
Okay.
So go try to find that. But that's the nature of the business, and that's what made wrestling great. I learned later the best part about ECW was guys leaving, because Dean Malenko, Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, they leave. We bring in Rey Mysterio, Psychosis. We introduce Lucha Libre to the United States. So it was always that swinging, revolving door that, the Dudley Boys leave, here come the Impact players. This person leaves, here comes the emergence of Rob Van Dam. So much stuff. That's what made it fresh, and I think that's another thing about the wrestling business. It's so hard to produce 5 hours of television a week, plus all the other shows they have on the network, and we just want to see variety. I'm a huge sports fan, but I don't want to see the Yankees and the Red Sox play every day. I want to see them play other teams. So I think that's beneficial for the wrestling business as well.
So you're going to be up there for probably another hour or so, up in the fan deck, and you can talk to Tommy Dreamer, take some photos and pictures and merchandise out there. Thank you so much. Give a hand to Tommy Dreamer. Thank you so much. So I think we have a handler headed to grab Dan Severin if he gets
Any
a
more
chance.
questions until Dan comes?
So-
I'll stay.
So you have a question?
Yeah, you mentioned Taker. Have you ever been in wrestler's court?
No,
No? Okay.
I've been a part of it, but
Well, yeah.
no, I wasn't in trouble. Model employee. They've done football players court. I'm reading a lot of books. As I get older, I enjoy everybody's journey.
Right.
A lot of stuff that went on in other sports too, or even in the media, they'll say they kick the media out, they kick the ownership out, and players try to handle their own business. I think it was not Golden State. Some basketball team just did that when they had a problem with somebody. Was it Golden State
It
with
could be
Durant?
Golden State, yeah, it was with Durant and
Yep,
Draymond.
and they kicked everybody out and said, let's settle this the way it should be, and that's how it, and it proves how successful they are.
What about the Dusty story?
What about it?
Anything.
He was my hero.
There you go.
He was everything you ever wanted to. They say you never want to meet your heroes, but he was always never let me down.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time he worked in the office across the hall from me when I was in WWE, and Paulie peeks into my office and he's like, "Dusty's in the office." And we're like two fans, and he's like, "Let's go see him." And he worked for us in ECW, and like two little kids, we just jumped up. We're like, yeah. And then we walked in. Adrian, what's up? He was as cool could ever be. I love him. I miss him every day. See.